The phone rang at 5:47 in the morning. Tom Harrison was already up, drinking coffee in his kitchen, farming hours. But the early call made his stomach tighten. Nothing good comes from a phone ringing before 6. "Tom, it's me!" His brother David's voice was shaking. "They're foreclosing. Bank sent the notice yesterday. 60 days to pay or they take the farm." Tom closed his eyes. This was the call he'd been dreading for 2 years. Ever since the farm crisis started crushing Iowa farmers in 1983, ever since crop prices collapsed and interest rates soared and banks started taking farms. "How much do you owe?" "Total debt is $187,000. They want $63,000 to bring it current and stop foreclosure. I don't have it, Tom. I'm done." Tom looked out his window at his own farm. 640 acres he'd bought in 1976. Paid for. No debt. He'd been conservative while David had been aggressive. Now David was losing everything while Tom was safe. "Don't do anything yet. Let me think." "There's nothing to think about. I can't come up with 63,000 in 60 days. The farm's gone. Grandpa's farm. Dad's farm. Gone because I was stupid." David's voice cracked. Tom heard him crying. 42 years old and crying because he was losing the family farm. "David, listen to me. Don't give up yet. I'll call you later today." Tom hung up, sat in silence. The farm David was losing had been in their family since 1928. Their grandfather bought it. Their father expanded it. David inherited it when Dad died in 1979. 400 acres of prime Iowa farmland. Now the bank was taking it. Tom knew why David was in trouble. Same reason hundreds of Iowa farmers were failing. David had borrowed heavily in the late 70s and early 80s when land prices were skyrocketing and crop prices were high. Bought more land, upgraded equipment, expanded aggressively. Tom had warned him. "You're taking on too much debt. What if prices drop?" David had laughed. "Prices won't drop. Land values only go up. I'm building something big here, Tom. You're too conservative. You'll regret not expanding when you had the chance." But prices did drop. Corn went from $4.20 a bushel in 1980 to $2.40 in 83. Soybeans crashed from $7.60 to $5.20. Land values collapsed from $2,000 per acre to $1,200. And interest rates soared. David's loans that started at 14% adjusted to 19 and 20%. The math became impossible. Tom had watched his brother struggle for 2 years, watched David work 100-hour weeks trying to save the farm, watched the stress destroy David's marriage. His wife left in 84, took the kids, watched the shame and desperation eat at his brother. Now the bank was foreclosing. Tom spent that morning thinking. He had savings, $68,000 in the bank, money he'd saved over 18 years of conservative farming, living cheap, never borrowing, banking every extra dollar. He could give David the $63,000, stop the foreclosure, save the family farm. But would that really help? David would still have $124,000 in remaining debt, still have sky-high interest rates, still have collapsed crop prices. Saving him now might just delay the inevitable, unless Tom did more than just stop the foreclosure, unless he actually fixed the problem. Tom drove to David's farm that afternoon, found his brother in the machine shed, sitting on an old tractor, staring at nothing. David looked up. Eyes red, face hollow. "Hey, tell me everything, every debt, every payment, every number. I need to see the whole picture." They spent 3 hours going through David's finances. It was worse than Tom thought. Total debt, $187,000. Land mortgage, $112,000 at 19%. Equipment loans, $48,000 at 18%. Operating line of credit, $27,000 at 21%. Annual debt service, $38,400. David's farm income in 84, $22,000 net after operating costs. He was 16,000 short on just debt service. Couldn't make it. Behind on payments by 63,000 accumulated over 2 years. Bank was done waiting. Tom looked at his brother. If I pay the 63 to stop foreclosure, can you make the regular payments going forward? No, I'm still 16,000 short annually. I can't generate enough income to cover debt service. Even if you stop foreclosure, I'll just fall behind again. Then we need to restructure everything. Cut the debt load so your income covers payments. How? Bank won't renegotiate. They want their money. Tom thought for a moment, then said something he hadn't planned to say, something that would change both their lives. I'll buy half your farm. Pay cash. You use the money to pay off all debt. Then you farm the remaining land debt-free. David stared. What? Your 400 acres is worth 480,000 at current prices of 1,200 per acre. I'll pay you 240,000 cash for half. That's 200 acres to me, 200 to you. You take the 240, pay off the 187 in debt, keep 53,000 for operating cash. You farm 200 acres debt-free. I farm my 640 plus the 200 I'm buying from you. We both survive. Tom, that would cost you everything you have saved. I have 68,000 saved. I'd need to take out a loan for the rest, 172,000. But I can handle that on 840 acres. You can't handle 187 on 400 acres. The math works for me, doesn't work for you. You'd go into debt to save me, to save the family farm, and to help my brother. Yeah, I would. David started crying again. I don't deserve this. I was arrogant. You warned me and I didn't listen. Doesn't matter now. What matters is solving the problem. Will you do it? David wiped his eyes. You're sure? This is everything you have. I'm sure. We'll go to the bank tomorrow. Make the offer. The next morning they met with Jim Peterson at First National Bank in Hampton. Jim had been the loan officer pressuring David for 2 years. Tom laid out the plan. I'm buying 200 acres from David for 240 cash. David pays off his 187 debt immediately. I take a loan for 172 at market rates to cover my purchase after using my 68 in savings. David farms 200 acres debt-free going forward. I farm 840 with manageable debt. Everyone wins. Jim studied the numbers. Your brother defaults and you bail him out by taking on debt yourself. Why would you do that? Because he's my brother. And because the math works for me even though it didn't work for him. I can carry 172 in debt on 840 acres. He couldn't carry 187 on 400. Scale matters. What stops David from failing again on the 200 acres? No debt. He can survive on 200 debt-free acres. Won't make a fortune, but won't lose the farm either. It's sustainable. Jim looked at David. You're okay with this? Giving up half the family farm? David's voice was quiet but firm. I'd rather farm 200 acres debt-free than lose all 400 to the bank. This keeps the Harrison family on Harrison land. That matters more than acreage. Jim approved the deal. Tom borrowed 172,000 at 16%. Used that, plus his 68,000 savings, to buy 200 acres from David for 240 total. David paid off all his debt, 187,000 to clear everything. Left him with 53,000 operating cash. The foreclosure was stopped. The family farm was saved, but split in half. Tom now owned 840 acres with 172 debt. David owned 200 acres with 0 debt. The community reaction was mixed. Some people admired Tom. That's incredible. He went into debt to save his brother. That's family loyalty. Others thought Tom was foolish. David made his own mess. Why should Tom sacrifice everything he built to bail him out? David will probably fail anyway. Tom ignored the criticism, focused on making the new arrangement work. He farmed his 840 acres efficiently. The debt was manageable, Annual payment at 16% was $27,500. Tom could cover that plus operating costs plus living expenses on 840 acres. It was tight, but doable. David farmed his 200 acres with no debt, netted about $18,000 annually, lived cheap, rebuilt his life slowly. The first year, 85, was hard for both brothers. Low crop prices, high costs. Both struggled, but both survived. In 86, prices improved slightly. Both had decent years. By 87, Tom had saved enough to make extra payments on his debt, started paying it down faster than required. By 89, Tom had reduced his debt to $140,000. Payments got easier. By 92, Tom paid off the entire 172, 10 years after the crisis. Owned 840 acres free and clear. David farmed his 200 steadily, never got rich, but never worried about losing it either. The peace of debt-free farming was worth more than size. In 1994, something unexpected happened. David came to Tom with a proposal. "I want to buy back 100 acres from you." Tom was surprised. "You have that kind of cash?" "I've saved $78,000 over 9 years. Land prices are up to $1,800 per acre now. 100 acres is $180 total. I'm short $102, but I thought maybe you'd sell to me for $78. Family discount." Tom smiled. "You saved $78,000 on 200 acres? Lived cheap, saved everything. Figured if you sacrifice for me in 85, I should work to earn it back. David, I'll sell you 100 acres for $78,000, but only if you promise to never borrow money again." "Deal." They made the transaction. David now owned 300 acres debt-free. Tom owned 740 debt-free. Both successful, both secure. The family farm wasn't lost. It was split between brothers who both owned their portions free and clear. In 2003, David retired. Sold his 300 acres for $900,000. Land prices had jumped to $3,000 per acre, moved to town, lived comfortably on investments. Tom kept farming his 740 until 2008, sold for $2.2 million, retired wealthy. At David's retirement party in 2003, David gave a speech that left everyone in tears. "In 1985, the bank was foreclosing on my farm. I was 60 days from losing everything, my grandfather's farm, my father's farm, my legacy. I failed them. I was arrogant and stupid and made terrible financial decisions. My brother Tom saved me. He paid $240,000, everything he had plus debt he took on, to buy half my farm so I could pay off the bank. He sacrificed his financial security to give me another chance. I will never forget that. Never. That act of brotherly love saved not just my farm, but my life. I was suicidal in 85. Thought about ending it all rather than face losing the family farm. Tom gave me reason to keep going. Over 18 years I paid him back by buying back 100 acres, but I can never truly repay what he did. The money, yes. The sacrifice and love, never. Tom showed me what family means. Blood is blood. When your brother is drowning, you throw him a rope even if it means risking yourself. That's what Tom did. That's the kind of man he is. David broke down crying. Tom stood and hugged his brother. Everyone in the room was crying. The bank had expected to foreclose David's farm in 1985. Tom made sure they didn't. Not through magic or luck, through sacrifice, smart math, and brotherly love. That sacrifice cost Tom everything he had saved, cost him 10 years of debt payments, cost him the comfortable financial cushion he'd built. But it saved his brother, saved the family farm, saved David's life. And in the end, both brothers retired wealthy. Both owned land they loved. Both built legacies worth more than money. Because Tom chose family over personal wealth, chose to risk his security to save his brother, chose love over selfishness. The bank expected foreclosure. Tom had a better plan, and he executed it perfectly. That's the story of two brothers, one farm crisis, and a sacrifice that changed everything. The bank wanted the farm. Tom made sure his brother kept it, through sacrifice. Through math, through love. Sometimes saving someone costs you everything. Sometimes it's worth it anyway. Tom Harrison proved that in 1985. His brother never forgot. Neither did their family, neither did their community. The farm that almost died lived on, split between two brothers who both survived because one was willing to sacrifice for the other. That's family. That's farming. That's what matters when everything else falls apart. The foreclosure process. 60 days of hell. When David received the foreclosure notice on March 4th, 1985, it wasn't a surprise. He'd been behind on payments for 18 months. The bank had sent warning letters, made phone calls, demanded meetings. David had tried everything, sold equipment at auction for terrible prices, cut every expense, worked side jobs. Nothing generated enough cash to catch up on the $63,000 he was behind. The foreclosure notice gave specific terms. Borrower is in default on loan obligations totaling $187,000. Borrower is currently $63,000 in arrears on scheduled payments. Bank hereby notifies borrower of intent to foreclose on collateral property described as 400 acres in Section 12, Township 23, Franklin County, Iowa. Borrower has 60 days from date of notice to cure default by paying all arrears plus accrued interest and fees. Failure to cure will result in foreclosure auction scheduled for May 7th, 1985. May 7th. The date was burned into David's mind. Auction day. The day the bank would sell his family's farm to the highest bidder. The day 4 generations of Harrison farming would end. David didn't sleep for 3 days after getting the notice. Couldn't eat. Couldn't function. Just sat in his house, the house his grandfather built in 1932, knowing he was about to lose it. His ex-wife called when she heard. "This is what you get for being so greedy. You had to expand. Had to be the big farmer. Now you've lost everything, including our marriage." His kids, 2 daughters, ages 14 and 11, didn't understand. "Why are we losing the farm, Dad? Can't you just pay the bank?" How do you explain to children that their father made catastrophic financial decisions that destroyed their legacy? The community knew within days. Small towns talk. Everyone heard David Harrison was being foreclosed. Reactions ranged from sympathy to schadenfreude. Some neighbors were kind. "It's not your fault, David. This economy is crushing everyone. You just got caught." Others were less kind. "I told him not to borrow so much. He didn't listen. Now he's paying the price." A few saw opportunity. 3 neighboring farmers contacted David about buying equipment at auction. "We'll give you fair prices to avoid having to bid against others." They were vultures. Wanted to pick the carcass before the bank even took it. David refused to talk to them. The worst part was watching his father's legacy disappear. Richard Harrison had farmed that land for 43 years, bought the original 200 acres in 1936 for $8,000 during the Depression, added another 200 in 1951, built it slowly, carefully, debt-free. He'd given it to David in 1979, saying, "Take care of this land. 4 generations of Harrisons have worked it. You're the 5th. Don't be the one who loses it." David was going to be exactly that, the Harrison who lost it all. When Tom agreed to help, David couldn't believe it. His conservative brother, who'd warned him about debt, was now willing to take on debt himself to save David. The irony was crushing. "Why would you do this?" David asked. "I didn't listen to you. I was arrogant. I deserved to lose it." Tom's answer was simple. "You're my brother. Family helps family. Always." Tom's sacrifice The real cost. When Tom borrowed $172,000 to buy half of David's farm, he understood exactly what he was risking. Tom had spent 18 years building financial security, started farming in 1967 with 320 acres he'd bought for $76,000, paid it off by 76, bought another 320 acres in 76 for 96,000 cash, paid for. He'd saved 68,000 over those 18 years by living exceptionally cheap. House from 1948, truck from 72, clothes from Sears, no vacations, no luxuries, just farming and saving. That 68,000 represented 18 years of sacrifice, and now he was spending every penny plus going 172 in debt. At age 49, Tom was taking on debt for the first time in his life. The 172 at 16% meant annual payments of $27,500. On 840 acres, that was tight but manageable. If crop prices stayed at current levels, if nothing went wrong, if equipment didn't break, if weather cooperated, if Tom had eliminated uncertainty from his life by paying cash for everything. Now he was adding massive uncertainty back in. His wife, Martha, was terrified. Tom, what if we can't make the payments? What if we lose everything trying to save David? We won't. I've run the numbers 50 times. We can make it work. But what about our retirement? We had 68,000 saved. Now it's gone. We have debt instead of savings. We're starting over at 49 and 53. I know, but David's my brother. I can't watch him lose the farm when I have the ability to prevent it. Martha supported him, but she was scared. They both were. The first year with debt, 85, was brutal. Tom farmed 840 acres while carrying $27,500 in annual debt service, plus operating costs, plus living expenses. He netted $38,000 that year. After debt payment, had $10,500 for everything else. Operating reserve, living costs, equipment repairs, everything. Tom and Martha cut expenses to the bone. Grocery bill, $140 per month. Utilities, $80 per month. No entertainment, no eating out, no new clothes. Bare survival mode. They made it through 85, barely. 86 was better. Crop prices improved. Tom netted 46,000. After debt service had 18,500. Could breathe slightly. By 87, Tom had saved enough to make extra principal payments, reduce debt by 12,000 that year. By 89, debt was down to 140. Payments got easier. But those first 4 years, 85 through 88, were hell. Tom worked 18-hour days, never rested, never relaxed, just worked to make sure the sacrifice wasn't wasted. Martha worked part-time at the feed mill to bring in extra cash, made $6,000 annually. Put it all toward debt reduction. Friends asked Tom if he regretted it. You gave up everything for David. Was it worth it? Tom's answer never changed. He's my brother. Family is worth more than money. Yes, it was worth it. David's transformation, from broken to rebuilt. The David Harrison who almost lost his farm in March 85 was a broken man. Arrogant decisions had cost him his marriage, his financial security, and nearly his legacy. The David Harrison who farmed 200 debt-free acres, starting in April 85, was different, humbled, grateful, determined never to repeat his mistakes. His first year on the reduced acreage was a lesson in humility. 200 acres versus his former 400. Half the operation, half the income, half the prestige. Neighbors talked. David's farming 200 acres now. That's barely a farm. He's basically a hobby farmer. David heard the whispers, felt the judgment. But instead of reacting with pride like old David would have, he absorbed it and kept working. He farmed those 200 acres more carefully than he'd ever farmed 400, watched every expense, maximized every bushel, maintained equipment meticulously to avoid replacement costs. His gross income on 200 acres in 85, 42,000. Operating costs, 24,000. Net, 18,000. 18,000 net on 200 acres, debt-free. He could live on that. Not luxuriously, but sustainably. David rented a small house in town, 2 bedrooms, 600 per month. His ex-wife had the farmhouse as part of divorce settlement. His living expenses, 12,000 annually, including rent, food, utilities, vehicle. That left 6,000 to save. Most farmers making 18,000 net would spend it all. David saved a third. Every year. 85 saved 6,000. 86 saved 6,300. 87 saved 7,200. By 94, he'd accumulated 78,000, enough to buy back 100 acres from Tom. But the transformation wasn't just financial. It was personal. David started going to church again. Hadn't been since his divorce. Found community there. Found peace. He reconnected with his daughters. They'd barely spoken to him during the crisis years. Now he made effort. Drove to see them every other weekend. Rebuilt relationships. In 91, David met Susan at church. She was a widow, 52 years old, farm background. They married in 92. Simple wedding. 30 people. No debt. Susan brought stability and joy David hadn't felt in years. She supported his conservative farming approach, helped him save money, encouraged his rebuilding. When David bought back 100 acres in 94, Susan cried, "You did it. You earned back part of what you lost." David's daughters came to the land closing, both in their 20s now. Seeing their father own 300 acres again, not 400 but still significant, meant everything. His older daughter told him, "Dad, I'm proud of you. You lost everything and you rebuilt. That takes strength." David's reply, "I didn't rebuild alone. Uncle Tom saved me. Your Uncle Tom sacrificed everything to give me another chance. Never forget that." The daughters didn't forget. At Tom's retirement party in 2008, both gave speeches about the uncle who'd saved their father and preserved their family legacy. David Harrison went from arrogant to humble, from leveraged to debt-free, from broken to rebuilt. The crisis that almost destroyed him actually made him better. The community impact. Other farms lost. While Tom saved David's farm, hundreds of other Iowa farms were lost to foreclosure in the mid-80s. In Franklin County alone, 73 farms were foreclosed between 83 and 86. 73 families lost their land. 73 legacies ended. The Johnsons, 3 miles south of David, lost their farm in April 85. Same month, David would have lost his if not for Tom. The Johnsons had farmed that land since 1922. Gone. The Mitchells, 5 miles east, lost theirs in June 85. 600 acres, 3 generations. Bank took it all. Sold at auction for 63% of what it was worth. The Andersons, the Petersons, the Williams family, all gone, all foreclosed, all victims of the same crisis that nearly took David. What made David different? He had a brother willing to sacrifice. The other families didn't have that. They faced foreclosure alone, fought it alone, lost alone. David attended several foreclosure auctions in 85 and 86, watched families he'd known for decades lose everything, watched bank representatives coldly conduct sales, watched vultures buy land cheap. He attended Bob Johnson's auction in April 85. Bob and his wife stood by their pickup truck crying as strangers bid on their equipment. Tractors that had been in their family for decades sold for 50 cents on the dollar. After the auction, Bob shook David's hand. "You got lucky, David. Your brother saved you. I didn't have anyone. Now it's gone." David never forgot that. The randomness of it. He could easily have been Bob Johnson, would have been without Tom. That realization kept David humble for the rest of his life. He never took his second chance for granted. In '98, when Bob Johnson needed help, David remembered. Bob had been working as a machinist since losing his farm, making $32,000 per year, struggling. David hired Bob as a farmhand, paid him $28,000 plus benefits, gave Bob a chance to work land again, even though it wasn't Bob's land anymore. Bob worked for David until retiring in 2006. At Bob's retirement, he told David, "Thank you for letting me farm again. I lost my land, but you gave me back the work I love." David's response, "My brother gave me a second chance. I'm passing it forward." That was the ripple effect of Tom's sacrifice. Tom saved David. David helped Bob. Kindness multiplying through the community. The math that made it work. People often ask Tom how he made the math work. How did he afford 172 in debt at 16% on 840 acres when David couldn't afford 187 on 400? The answer was scale and efficiency. David's situation in '85? 400 acres, 187 debt, debt-to-asset ratio, 39%, debt 187, land value 480. Annual debt service, 38,400. Net farm income, 22,000, deficit 16,400 annually. Unsustainable. David couldn't cover debt service with farm income. Was going deeper in hole every year. Tom's situation, after buying 200 acres from David, 840 acres, 640 original plus 200 from David, 172 debt, debt-to-asset ratio, 17%, debt 172, land value 1.01 million. Annual debt service, 27,500, net farm income, 38 to 46,000 depending on year, surplus, 10 to 18,000 annually sustainable. Tom could cover debt service and have operating margin. The larger scale made the debt manageable. Why? Because operating costs don't scale linearly with acres. Tom's operating costs per acre were lower than David's because of efficiency. Tom's operating costs on 840, approximately 420 per acre. David's operating costs on 400, approximately 540 per acre. The difference, 120 per acre, meant Tom could generate more net income per acre. On 840 acres, that difference was over 100,000 in efficiency advantage. Plus, Tom had no debt service before the bailout. Had been farming conservatively, had systems and equipment in place. Adding 200 acres didn't proportionally increase his costs. David had been operating at maximum leverage, no room for error. Any decrease in income was catastrophic. Tom had room, could absorb setbacks, could weather bad years. That's why the math worked for Tom, but not for David. Not luck, not magic, just scale, efficiency, and conservative prior management. The lesson: when sacrifice makes sense. Tom Harrison's sacrifice raised a question many people debated. When does it make sense to risk everything to save someone else? Some argued Tom was foolish. David made bad decisions. Why should Tom pay for them? Let David face consequences. Others argued Tom was noble. That's what family does. You help when someone's drowning. Tom's perspective was practical. I didn't sacrifice blindly. I ran the numbers. I knew I could handle the debt. If I couldn't have, I wouldn't have done it. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated. But it was also emotional. Tom loved his brother, couldn't stand watching him lose the family farm when Tom had the means to prevent it. The key factors that made Tom's sacrifice work. 1. Tom had the financial capacity. He could afford to take on debt at his scale. If he'd been struggling himself, the sacrifice wouldn't have worked. 2. The math was sound. Tom didn't just throw money at the problem, he restructured it so both brothers could survive long term. 3. David was worth saving. Despite his mistakes, David was hard-working and honorable. He'd made bad financial decisions, not moral failures. He deserved a second chance. 4. The farm meant something. 4 generations of family history. That was worth preserving. 5. Tom could accept the risk. He and Martha understood they might struggle. They chose to anyway. Not every situation merits sacrifice. But this one did. And Tom executed it perfectly. The bank expected foreclosure. Tom made sure they didn't get it. Through sacrifice, yes, but also through smart math, careful planning, and understanding what was truly at stake. That's the full story. 2 brothers, 1 farm crisis, a sacrifice that saved a legacy and changed 2 lives forever. The bank wanted the farm. Tom's sacrifice ensured his brother kept it, and both brothers built successful futures because one was willing to risk everything for the other. That's family. That's farming. That's what matters when everything falls apart.